basically, fellas, when we get something like this, we need to work out what relates to other things. So is this bit of data related to another bit of data? And those type of things. So what of those fields or columns do you think is related to something else up there?
Player code and player name.
Okay, so that would be a good, easy one to get us started. So we look at this player has a name. What we're trying to do is, you notice how George Wicks is up there 3 times and his player code is up there 3 times. Certain bits of that data is being done over and over again. So we look at his manager is there 3 times, his height is there 3 times. So it's quite inefficient, particularly if you end up going for a long period of time. You'll have massive amounts of data. Also, if his manager changes, you've got to go and find Joe King however many times in the spreadsheet and then change it. If you do it in a database, you go to one spot, you change it, and it's good to go. Okay, anything else that's connected to something else? So all of them eventually...
Player height and player name.
Okay, you're close. It's actually player code and player height. So why wouldn't we hook it to player name?
So they could be the same.
Yeah, there could be 2 George Wicks or Cameron Curtises or whatever. So player code, remember we try to link it to unique things like your driver's license number or your car rego. Yes, Storm?
What if the player won't change?
You would change it for just that player. So you've got to record it at some stage. So obviously you fellas were shorter in grade 8 than you are now. Type of thing. Some of you might have been a man-child and you're about the same, but okay. Any others? What else is up there that connects to something else?
Round of points.
Okay. So is it any use to us recording in round 2 there were 25 points?
No,
Depends what you're trying to find, really.
because what's the 25?
Well, what's the 25 relate to? Who got the 25?
To John Wick.
Georgie.
George.
John Wick.
John Wick.
George.
Interesting movie.
John Wick's skin.
Okay. What this one is it's actually a ternary. So I'm just going to circle them. So that one there, that one there, and that one there are a ternary. What can you remember about ternaries?
3.
There's 3 things. So if I say player 239 scored 25 points, what information do I lose if I just connect those 2 as a binary? So I'll say it again a different way. So old mate got 25 points. If we don't include the round number, we don't know when that happened. And then in the next one, in round 4, he got 11 points. And so there's 3 things that you can't really separate them into 2 things and then separate 2 things. The same if we say in round 4 there are 11 points. Well, unless you record the player's code, you don't know who that player was. And equally, if you say player in round 4 did what? Well, the player code in round 4 did whatever. You don't know what they did. Did they get points or rebounds or whatever it was? Okay, so that's a ternary one. They look a little bit different when we draw them on our diagram later on and when we do elementary sentences. Okay, manager. How does manager work? Yep, it will link to the player code as well. So I'll just put a red line in there. So essentially those 3 red lines, they're all binary ones. So if we want to think they're binary, those other green fellas are ternary. Yes, Sam?
With the manager one, like you just said, if you connected it to player code and manager, technically it would just be like Joe King is managing 239. That you need to add the player's name in there.
Yep, we'll get to that. Yeah, we don't lose any information, but they'll be in 2 separate tables if you want to think of it in those terms. Okay, what's our job? What do binary ones look like? So I'm going to draw a binary one and the one ternary one, and I'll get you fellas to do a couple of other ones. So let's say we join the player to his name. So with the player code to player name. What do elementary sentences look like? Anyone remember? Good. 2 things and 1 in the middle.
Like they can be reversed.
Yes, good. Okay, how do we start? That's the $1 million.
Start with
Okay, first thing is called an entity. So what is player code?
it's an entity.
It's stuff about a player, isn't it? Or it's an entity. Okay, I just have to fix my pen. Someone stuffed them up on me. Quite rude. Okay. Okay, player, the actual field is called player code. So remember the thing in brackets, which is called the reference mode, is the actual thing in our database. So we're sort of doing it a little bit backwards in a way. And we just put an example of that. Okay, for a gold star, what's the thing at the end called? Has a special name.
Is it related to binaries?
Anyone? What's the 239 at the end? It has a special label. George, gold star to you. Well done. Congratulations, George. I don't care if he Googled it. He had an answer.
At least he tried.
Why don't that sit at my desk?
But he got it right.
I tried that.
Yeah, maybe
Okay. We're going to leave the role, the connecting bit, for a sec. The other one, player name, is just player again. Okay, player name. And we've got George Wicks. Okay, what's the connection between the player and the number and the thing? Yeah, so we might say have player code of is player code of. Okay, again, those things, if you read them out, don't really make a great deal of sense to us, particularly the reverse role. We don't, that should be player name, not player code. Oh no, I've killed a bit. Buggered it, but never mind, I'll recover. Okay, so 239 has player name of George Wicks. George Wicks is player name of whoever. So if you do that has and is, you don't go too far wrong most of the time. The next bit, when we do a ternary one, so how many lines in a binary? There's 3. So there's 3 lines there. Good. How many in a ternary?
3.
No, there's 3 things. There's 5. Okay. So again, we can start with player. So player code 239. Okay, and then we link in the round. So we'd say that's a round. The thing in our database, we actually called it round number. And it's round 2. And then we have points and points. And he got 25. So how can we put something, so 239 in round 2. Scored 25.
What game is this?
Basketball, I would think. Yeah. Okay, going back the other way, 25 something something were scored in round 2 by player, something like that. I'm never going to carve you up if you get those, especially the reverse ones. They don't really read all that flash, and they're not meant to really. Okay, a couple of things to take note of. If we look here, whatever this is called, so see how that's round number there? It's called round number there. Okay, so that thing is your reference mode. That's what we refer to it in the database as. So that is very important to do. What I'd like you gents to have a crack at is writing a couple of binary ones. So one joining player code and manager, and one doing player code and player height. So do those. They should only take you a minute or two. Okay. Now that we're looking at the other two we needed to add, so we're looking at the player code to the manager and player code to the player height. So remember, we've got player and player code, and the number has manager of, is manager of. The key thing to get right, again, is the thing in brackets, the reference mode. So it's all well and good to have the other ones, you've got a little bit of flexibility, but the reference mode, you've got to get spot on. The player height one, I put the centimetres in there. Sometimes it's useful to record stuff like that. So lots of things I'll record in centimetres rather than 1.93 metres and that type of thing. Okay, any questions about that stuff? All happy enough with that? Okay, what is our next step? So we've now done, we've identified what relates to what, we've done the elementary sentences. We have to draw out what's it called? It has a special name.
The words. Conceptual schema.
Schema diagram. Conceptual schema diagram.
Okay, so conceptual schema diagram. The idea of these things is it allows you to model how your data relates to itself. So looking at the first elementary sentence we drew was player code and player name. So what we can do is draw that. So down here we'll put player and then player code like so. So that's the top line of that first one, and it's going to link out this way to player and player name. Okay, so those two things are related. Where would we put the round one, the green one out the side? So it's a ternary one. Does anyone remember what ternaries look like? Yeah, so they've got the extra piece on them. So just to give us a little bit of space, I'll draw it out this way. Okay, so this will link to round and round number. But because it's a ternary, there are three aspects to it. This is what you call nesting. So you do this, and then you make one extra one here, and this is the points one. Okay, so from back up here a little bit, you'll see here is our three parts. So player code, the round and the points, and they come down here, player code, round and the points. So all three aspects of that need to be present or we lose some information from it. Where would the next one go? So now I want to add the player manager into that thing. How would it link into that diagram? Anybody? Anyone? Where would manager go? So what's manager connected to in our elementary sense? Player code. So it will have one that comes out here, and there'll be manager. And manager. And the last one, where does the player height fit into it? Okay, it comes from player code again. These things can get a little bit congested at times.
Hey sir,
Yeah.
see that the one that has like 3 coming off.
The ternary one, yep.
Yeah, oh, is that just a ternary?
Yeah, that's a ternary one. Okay.
So are those 3 all linked together?
Yep, so everything links to everything else. Okay, we're looking at this. Here's our ternary one that Xavier just asked about. It links to this part. So it's got player code, the round number, and its points. Okay, the other ones all link to player code. So you'll notice as you do more and more of these, things like player codes that will be a primary key or they're unique things like driver's license numbers, students' codes, subject codes, all those things that are codey and IDs and all of that stuff, they tend to dominate these diagrams because that's their job. They're supposed to link stuff together. Okay, now we've got that going. What happens after that? So we've got our diagram, our conceptual schema diagram.
Do we have to do yes and no?
We do have to do our yes and no things. What are they called?
Yes and no.
Joiners.
Line.
Joiners.
Unequal constraints.
Uniqueness constraints. Okay, I'm going to represent them with a little red line. What is the magic phrase? A few of you said it before. What do we have? Only one. Well done. Okay, remember our have only one is very useful to us because it gives us the language to connect the things together. So if I look at my player code to a player name and I'm going from left to right, so essentially we're looking at this box here. So does a player code have only one name recorded? Yeah, and again you look at your data a little bit. So if you say yes, you will put a line. So there's my line above the roll box. And this explains how the things are connected to each other. Okay, does a player name have only one code?
Yeah.
Yeah?
No.
Possibly not.
Player name have one.
Okay, we could have 2 people named Fred Smith. So in the AFL, I don't know anymore, but there used to be a couple of blokes with the same, they were like John Smith and those type of common names. Can't be there. Okay, does a player have only one manager?
Yes.
Yeah? So we're saying for simplicity they do. Does a manager have only one player?
No.
Probably not. So if you're a sports manager, you probably have a few people. Unless you're someone like a Roger Federer, who would be a full-time job for multiple people, I would think. Depending on the circumstances. So if you're a rugby league one, there'd be lots of people have the same manager in playing NRL or Super Rugby or golf or tennis or whatever. Does a player have only one height? Yep. So that will change over time potentially, especially if it's a junior database we're doing. No, people grow all the time in bursts.
In the morning than you are in the afternoon.
Okay, does a height have only one player?
It's true.
Yes or no?
No.
They could be the same.
No. So if you get a big enough database, there's going to be lots of people who are the same height. Okay, now we move our attention to the ternary one. So the ternary one, does a player play in only one round? No. Does a round have only one player? No. So if you've said no and no, and this is the roll box we're interested in here, if you've said no and no, what do you draw on the diagram? You do. You can think of it as a big no-no. It's actually a many-to-many relationship. So a player is in many rounds, a round has many things. You call it a monobrow. I don't particularly care how you do it, as long as you remember it. Okay. Last bit.
Still has one.
Sam, let's focus on this rather than historical monobrows. Okay. Does a player in a round score only one lot of points? Yes. Okay, but that would possibly be in a different round. Okay, does a number of points have only one player round combo?
No.
No, so it could happen lots of times that people get 17 points.
Or 6 points.
Okay, if you look at the ternary one, you'll notice that the main join on the nested bit is always a many-to-many, and that line is always closest to the many-to-many. You can't actually draw them correctly any other way. So if you can remember, that's always many-to-many. That line there is always closest to the thing. You should never get one wrong. Okay, now we're going to put our other constraint on there. Okay, and these ones are called mandatory constraints. What does the word mandatory mean? Compulsory. You have to have it. If we skim up to our data, we can look what things aren't necessary or mandatory. So what data doesn't exist, in other words, for some of them?
Player height.
Okay, so player height, and old mate Stuart doesn't have a manager, so it's not compulsory to record a manager. He might self-manage or not even be up to chop and doesn't need one. And you don't need to record the player height, so remember that when we come down here. The easiest way to do it is to identify them straight away. So there's a link. So if we record a player's code, do we need to record the manager? So that one there we're interested in doing at the moment. So I'll say it again.
No.
If we record a player, do we need to record a manager? No.
Players don't have.
Okay, technically you should leave that blank. What I'll get you blokes to do is put a big open circle around it like that.
It's not mandatory.
So it's not mandatory, it's optional. In what we call NIAM, which is the technique we're using to model this stuff, they only have two: you're either mandatory or you're not mandatory. In other ones that I've learnt when I was at uni, there used to be one that was also optional becoming mandatory. So you don't have to have it at the moment, but at some stage you would need it. Okay, going the other way, if I record stuff about a manager, do we need to have a player attached to that? Yeah, we would. So we would put a big solid dot on that end. So it's not much point recording a manager if you don't have a player attached to them, because if they have no players at all, they wouldn't be a manager, I suppose. Okay, the other one was height. So if we record a player code, do we need to record their height? No, we don't. So that one is optional. So a big open circle, or leave it blank altogether. If we record a height though, do we have to have a player attached to it? Because there's not much point going 187 and have a blank at the other end, because it gives you no joy. Okay, back up the top, those are the only two things that are optional fields. Everything else, so the round number, the points, so even if old mate gets no points in a round, they're still recorded. So once you've got your ones, essentially the rest of your job is just to go on a bit of a colouring in spree and do your other mandatory ones. In an exam situation and you forget, so I ask you to put some mandatory constraints on it, and assuming you remember that that's the dot ones, if you're not sure how to do it, just colour everything in. So put dots on all of them, because I can't tell which ones you've actually know what you're doing and you can't, so you're going to get part marks.
What if you do like a really thick circle?
Okay,
I was recording for 24 minutes.
next bit. We are now going to look at that we've got our constraints on it. Your next job is to actually work out what your different tables are going to be. And we haven't done this a lot, so if you listen carefully, I'll walk you through it. The idea now is that we identify what our tables are. And every time you see a ternary, it will be a table in its own right. And what you do is we put a big line around it like that, around the roll box. So that's going to be a table. We then look at the other bits of data and see which ones they are more attracted to. And this is where our uniqueness constraints come into play. So see those red lines there? And again, they don't need to be read. They all tend to be attracted to the player code. So if you want to think of them in terms of it's magnetic and they're pulled towards it, it's a bit like saying that player code is more important than player name in this database. Player code is more important than the manager, player code is more important than the height. Some people like to think of the little things as if they're little arrows, and they're saying, I'm more important than you. However you remember it, whether it's this thing is like an arrow and pointing to it and saying player code is really important, or it's a magnet and it's attracting the things, doesn't particularly faze me as long as you get the concept right. Okay, so all of those things will be in a table together. Okay? Our last job is then to actually draw the diagram, work out what our tables are. So, now that we've got that there, we can actually create our table. So what type of information is stored in this one? So that, yeah, stuff about players, isn't it? So we might call our table players. Okay, what's the most important thing in the players table? Yeah, but which of those four? So there's 4 entities, 4 reference modes associated with this thing here. Which one is the most important? Okay, player code, because the other 3 are attracted to it. It's a bit like it's the favourite of all of them, if you want to think in simple terms. Okay, why do you think I underline player code? Okay, any ideas?
Oh, this is
The thing that everything links to, that is correct. What is the proper name for the thing? The key, the primary key, very good.
Yeah, did you know that? Wow.
He comes good every now and again, it's good stuff. Okay,
But apart from
so our primary key we underline in our table, so we know down the track it's going to be more important, and then you simply put the other bits. There's no necessity to actually put okay, so that will be that table, the other table. So what's this, the ternary one now, details of? So you've got a player, a round and points. What would be a good overall name for that? I'll give you a clue. How about we call it stats?
it's a good clue.
Okay, what are the, in ternaries there's actually 2 things that are the primary key. So it's a combination of a player and round. So we need to underline both of those. So we would have player code as one, and we would have round number as the other one. Okay, and then finally we put points on the end. So looking at our thing now, you'll see that is what's called a dual primary key. So it's the combination of player code and round number. So you can't have a player playing the same round twice, or you can't have a round that has a player in there twice. But we can say player 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in round 17 scored 6 points, no points, whatever. And that's how that part works. The last thing I want to show you before I stop this is realistically our database will now look like this. So if I get that thing there, and I paste that there, and I paste that there, realistically we can get rid of this stuff out of that table. We go to, where's the damn thing, delete. So that table will look like that. This stats one will look like this. So we're going to have the player, so that bit will get deleted, and this manager stuff at the end gets deleted. Okay, so here is our two tables at the end. That's our players table. Here's our stats table. So that one becomes that one becomes that one. Okay, because of that we can get rid of some stuff. So this part here, those extra couple of rows we can get rid of. We can get rid of one of those two as well. So our database now looks like that. We have two distinct tables and it's now really efficient. So up here, when we first started, we had lots of things doubled up. So we had George Wicks in there 3 times, we had his height in there 3 times, we had his manager 3 times. And that's just for 3 rounds. You imagine if it was like in the Major League Baseball in America, they have something ridiculous like 150 rounds a season type of thing. So if you record that for a player in a season 150 times, who their manager is, who their height is, what their weight is, their left arm, right arm, their shortstop, a backstop, whatever, you do that 150 times for one player in a season and you've got, I don't know, a couple of 100,000 players, whatever it is, there's massive amounts of data. If we get it like this, we have a much more efficient one. So we're really only recording 3 numbers for each game. Okay, in the big scheme of thing over here, if Joe King gets replaced as George's manager, we go to one spot and we change it in one spot. If he gets a bit taller or he got a bump on the head and he becomes shorter, we can adjust it in one spot. If those type of things, they change their name. So not particularly, gentlemen don't tend to change their names, but if ladies get married, they may choose to take their partner's surname as part of that. And so those type of things. Okay.